When I started college in 2011, I formed a solid friendship group and threw myself right into the social life. This one guy on my block, he would always show up to parties but never spoke much to anyone. He was kind of a classic neckbeard, sort of overweight, an anime fan lacking in social skills, combined with lots of awkward attempts to be overconfident. He also really never washed himself, always wore stained gray clothes that he never changed, and had long, lank, greasy hair. He was just surrounded by a cloud of BO, and it would enter the room even before he did. Sorry if this description sounds unnecessarily mean. I wouldn't normally judge people for these sorts of things all by themselves, but combined with his behavior since, it's frankly quite warranted. With regret in hindsight, I made the mistake of chatting with him at one of these parties, with the aim of being friendly and helping him get more integrated into the group. From that very moment that I talked to him though, it was like a switch flipped in him. He began obsessively stalking me, which would go on for the rest of freshman year. He would try to isolate me at social events, talking to me for hours on end, and taking none of my cues that I wanted to bring it to a close. If I ever tried to lose him, somehow he would always find me. If I spent time with my actual friends, he would follow close behind and force his way into the conversation, following me around like a wasp on a mission. If he saw me in public, he would give me this 1,000-yard, unblinking stare, even from a couple 100 meters away. Then he would just sort of beeline over. It got to the point eventually that I thought perhaps I even might have some kind of tracker placed on me, because somehow, wherever I was, he would always appear, even when leaving the campus library at 3 a.m. More than once at night even, I looked through the spy hole on my door to the hall outside to see him just standing there, staring intensely at my door. Obviously, this was seriously creepy and disturbing behavior. Suddenly I felt hunted. I was frightened and on alert all the time. I started to avoid even going out of my room if I could. I also started going to my folks quite a lot, just so I could get out of that town. All of my friends were really worried about me, and a couple of them confronted him about his behavior and asked him to leave me alone. This did not go down well. Instead, his obsession turned into a rage. Thankfully, he kept a bit more of a distance, but he would still hang out in places he knew I would be. Staring at me now with an intense hatred, he started telling everyone that I was his girlfriend and had dumped him in a horribly cruel way. It made me question myself that a few people actually somehow believed him even. This continued well into our sophomore year, when he got close to one of my housemates and started turning up unannounced at our place suddenly. This friend believed the stories he was telling and thought I was being unfair and asking him not to bring this guy around to our house. Well, it turns out he used this opportunity to steal my mail, including a new bank card. I have no evidence directly that it was him, but I had so much stuff just suddenly go missing that it had to be him doing this. I even once found him hiding in my bathroom. That was the last straw. And then my roommate finally accepted that this guy had probably been lying. When I moved away, the in-person stuff stopped. Instead, he started cyber stalking me, trying daily to hack any of my accounts he could find. This continued, though to a lesser extent over time, for a period of 3 years. Since then, everything seemed to die down, and I thought it was over. Recently, though, I found this blog where he writes fantasy stories about our relationship and still calls me the love of his life, even more than 10 years later. To keep a long story short, my ex-best friend Alyssa and I were friends for almost 7 years just about. We had a very good, healthy relationship. She was my ride or die actually. We did everything together. But slowly, as tends to do, we started to drift away when I exchanged schools. Still though, we saw each other after school, so it was still cool. Well, a year passed by, and I started to notice Alyssa hanging out with the wrong crowd. I didn't exactly want to have any part of that. I also started to notice how Alyssa would now pick on me about my appearance and clothing, but she used to dress just like me. We used to be dripped out in anime merch, but ever since she started hanging out with these more mature college people, she flat out changed. She would constantly tell me I was fat, ugly, or that nobody loves me. All that type of hurtful stuff every chance she got. The last straw was when she called my family poor. I lost it because my family had helped her with financial problems in the past, and even directly pulled them out of debt. So, because of this, I stopped being friends with her, and I started to hang out with new people and get to know myself more. I made a new best friend, and everything was really great. I did note, though, that now I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched in every corner. I always felt like someone was there watching me, but I ignored it. Months passed, and I still couldn't shake that feeling of being watched. Suddenly, some weird stuff started to happen. The first thing was that my car ended up keyed. My tires were popped most of the time, and weird letters I had to decipher started showing up on my front porch. I was dumb, but I decided to ignore the problems. I didn't really know how to approach them. A year later, I decided to hang out with some old friends from the group, and that's when I found out everything. Alyssa was the one doing these things to me, and every letter she sent was a death threat. My friend Tori, the one who had witnessed everything, told me about how Alyssa would stalk me all the time and got mad that I had replaced her with a guy. That's not what creeped me out, though. Turns out Alyssa copied everything. If I would get a 2018 Nissan Sentra, she would get the exact same car. Inside my dashboard on my car as decorations, I have these My Hero Academia figures and South Park figures. She went as far as to get the exact same ones online and even put them in the same spots on her dashboard. She would wake up at 6 a.m., drive all the way to my house, wait for me to wake up, and then get out of the house so she could follow my exact route. She tried adding my friends on social media and even tried to convince them to leave me for her because she was a better friend than me. She started buying the exact same clothes I did. According to Tori, when she would visit Alyssa at her house, she even had the exact same room decoration posters. I couldn't even believe all this at first, until she showed me picture proof. I wish she had sent them to me directly. Everything was the same, as if Tori was seeing double of everything. Luckily for me, Alyssa was forced to move up north with her father after her grandmother kicked her out of the house for strange behavior. Everything went back to normal since then, for now at least. I'm just scared that when she comes over for the holidays, she'll start to stalk me again. This story takes place when I was around 16 or 17 years old. I lived with my dad in a little apartment in a questionable area. It was the type of area you'd not want to be out and about in when the sun goes down. Up until about a certain time, like 10 or 11 p.m., there would always be a cop or two in the area, patrolling and making sure there were no gang-related activities going on. I had a job at a restaurant in the city, which was about a 30-minute car ride and an hour-and-a-half train ride away. The train was a couple blocks away from my place, and since my dad was always too lazy or hungover to drive me, that was my main form of transportation. I went to work at around 3 p.m. and would usually get home at around 12 or 1. This was my schedule 4 days a week aside from having school. I would see a lot of familiar faces on the train because of this, but we never really made conversation with each other. That is, until one night, when I got out of work late because some assholes wanted to sit in the restaurant past closing. Thanks to them, I missed my intended train. The next one wasn't scheduled to arrive for another hour, so having nowhere to go and no money for Lyft or Uber, I was stuck there waiting. No one was around me, so when this older man showed up kind of staggering around a bit, I assumed that perhaps he was yet another drunken hobo in the city trying to catch a train to sleep in. Something about his face, though, gave me déjà vu, but I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I'd seen him wandering around on the train here and there. He made his way directly over to me, much to my discomfort, and immediately started up a conversation. He wasn't slurring exactly, but the way he was looking down at me just gave me goosebumps. He started by asking me why I was out there so late all by myself. I felt like I had to reply as to not anger him. I mean, we were there all alone, and he was close enough to me to pull out a knife or something by this point. Anyway, I told him I was just waiting for the train, and he asked me which one. Now, the train was color-coded with a strip at the top to indicate whether it goes north, south, east, or west. I took blue, but I lied and told him I was going to take green. He looked at the schedule above the benches and saw the green train was coming in 15 minutes. He said he'd keep me company. For those extremely long 15 minutes, he asked me how long I had been working at So-So Restaurant. This made my blood run cold. I had never once told him where I worked. I just looked at him strangely and timidly answered, "For about a year." He laughed. "Wow, it's already been a whole year, huh?" At this point, my skin started itching out of anxiety. As soon as the green train came, I knew I had no choice but to take it. I said goodbye to him and thanked him for the chat, hoping that would be the end of it. But no. He suddenly told me that he had to take the green train too, so he followed me on and sat directly behind me. My mind was racing about whether he was going to try and do something to me like chloroform me or hurt me in some other way, but we rode the train together in silence. I was trying to figure out the entire time how I was going to lose him. There weren't exactly many people riding the train at that hour. In fact, our car was completely empty besides us, unfortunately. As the ride went on in menacing silence, I could feel him staring down the back of my head. I waited until we got to a stop where there was another person. I was so relieved to see a woman sitting there. She wasn't boarding, so I immediately got off the train. The man followed me, as expected. I took a seat on the bench right next to hers, close enough for her to see and hear everything going on, hoping she would catch on. The man noticed that I was sniffling, combination of allergies and being out in the cold, and asked if I was sick. I told him no, but he insisted on giving me these strange pills he had that were supposedly cold medicine. I declined him in a louder voice. "Sorry, I don't accept pills from strangers." This prompted the lady to look over to us, and I made direct eye contact with her. This went on until a blue train came. The lady got up and gave me a look that told me to get on with her, so without explanation, I did. She waved me over to sit next to her. When the man tried to follow, she blocked him and told him to sit somewhere else, made him sit a couple seats across from us. He chose the one where he could face us, and stared at me the entire time. I was shaking and about to burst into tears. The woman leaned over and whispered to me that she had a pistol. I felt safer with her there. We whispered back and forth about what had happened. I told her where I lived and how I was worried he would follow me home now. She told me a friend of hers would be boarding the train soon, and when he did, she told me his name was Ray. Ray was filled in about everything and agreed to escort me home. She promised me that I could trust him. The two of them waited with me until I got to my stop. The man, still watching me, started to smile widely, resembling the Cheshire Cat. He shouted to me, "Hey, this is your place, right?" I just gave the woman a hug and thanked her. Ray and I hurriedly hopped off the train. As I looked back, I saw the woman had pulled out her pistol and told the man to sit back down, even blocking the exit with her body. I finally let myself cry in relief. Ray walked me all the way home and tried to calm me down by telling me about his job and his family. After watching me get inside the gates of my apartment safely, I thanked him profusely for his help. It chills me to think about how that night would have turned out if I hadn't met up with that woman and her friend. I feel extremely lucky to this day. I never saw that man again after that, and eventually stopped thinking about him. But in the back of my head, that creepy, aroused smile of his was burned into my mind, and I can't help but wonder just what else he knew about me. I was reminded of him just last week. After almost 5 years of not hearing from him, I saw him again. I'll try my best to summarize this nightmare. Some things to note which are important to the story. 1. It happened in 2017, and during that time we went a whole year without having neighbors on either side. So basically, we were crammed in between 2 empty houses. 2. The streetlight in our lot had broken, and despite multiple reports to the council to fix it, nobody ever did. One evening, my family went out for groceries. I was left behind home alone. The gate was still wide open when they left because the water pipe was located outside. I used it all the time back then because I had rabbits, so I used that water to fill their water bowls. That day was no different. The sun was already setting by the time I went out to fill the bowls, feed the rabbits, and then lock the gate. It was literally 5 minutes after I locked it that someone was outside. Since the sun was already low on the horizon and with the streetlight broken, I could barely make out his face. The man was outside with a van, yelling for my attention. He said something about his company sending him over to do some property surveillance. It was suspicious, all right, so I ignored him and went inside. Later on, when the night got dark, my family still had not returned yet. I was inside watching Chicken Little when I suddenly heard some commotion outside. I didn't directly look at it, but I stole some glances. I could make out a figure outside, literally in front of my gate. He was shouting for my attention once again, and guess who it was? Yep, the same guy from before. I recognized his voice again. I paid him no attention. After a seemingly long few minutes, it got quiet outside. I took another peek out only to see, holy shit, he was attempting to climb into my house. I was so shocked I couldn't move. Luckily, that time we had a dog named Buck, who passed away not long after, unfortunately. He was probably napping in one of his hiding spots and sensed the man's presence. As soon as the guy saw Buck coming at him, he stopped climbing and rode away on his bike. No more van. And that was that. Ever since then, though, I kept seeing him around. How do I know it was him when I couldn't even see the face in the first place? Well, because after that particular incident, every now and then there was always this person hanging literally outside our gate with his bike. He was always making this weird sound too, like when your person smack your lips. Every time I tried to report it to my dad, the guy would just ride away as soon as he saw my dad checking. One time I was at the backyard collecting my laundry. If you stand on the left side of my gate but facing in, you can see the area in our backyard where we wash and dry out the clothes. I saw him standing right there, making those weird sounds again, which drew my attention. I yelled out for my dad, and once again he saw my dad and booked it immediately out of there. This had been going on now for almost a month. While he hadn't actually posed a physical threat, it was enough for me to feel uncomfortable and unsafe to even want to go out at night by myself. Oh, but it got worse. My room is on the outer side of the house, so basically I have a window that faces the front. My room is situated on the right side, so my direct view is the overgrown bushes covering the fence. If I peek my head out that window and look to the right, I can clearly see the gate. One night, I was in my room doing some work on my desk, I think. The window was to my left. I'd left it open, as I always liked the night breeze coming in. I don't remember exactly how long I was working for, but all of a sudden I felt this strong feeling of dread washing over me. It was like I wasn't safe in the comfort of my own room anymore, like I was being watched. I looked out the window and tried to see in the dark. I could barely make it out. But there he was. I knew it was him. Somehow he'd managed to squeeze in between the bushes and was hanging on to the fence. He saw me, and I could feel a smile come over his face. He made those awful lip-smacking sounds again. I booked it the fuck out of there like a bolt of lightning. Again, I reported it to my dad, but again he'd somehow made it out of there before we could catch him in the act. Because of his amazing disappearing act, my dad and sister sometimes thought that some of the incidents were just imagined. Whenever they turned their eyes outside, they would see nothing, but I was the one who saw him every time. I know for a fact that it was real though, that he was real, and it was the same person every time. This continued on for another month or so 2 months in total. He'd come and taunt me with his lip-smacking skill, and rode away before my dad or sister could ever get a good look at him. Then one day he just stopped coming. I didn't see or hear his stupid lip-smacking sounds anymore. That is, until last week. I was home alone again. My sister was caught up at work, and my dad had left to pick up my brother from his workplace. I was sitting in the living room watching the TV when I heard that awfully familiar lip-smacking sound. At this point, our streetlight was still broken. We'd installed some fence lights though. Somehow though, this guy figured it out and hid in the dark where the light was too faint to reach. I could see he was out there with his bike again, only this time I heard him giggle. I've never heard him giggle before, and this wasn't the cute kind. It sounded malicious. I tried my hardest to ignore him, to not pay any attention, but he was out there making all sorts of noises. Over a year ago, we got a new dog, Gibbs. He was a rescued stray. He must have heard the man too. As soon as the guy saw Gibbs start chasing after him, he rode away again. That was last week. 5 years ago, he terrified me to the point where I was so afraid of being outside on my own at night, even if it were just to pick up laundry. Sometimes at night, I couldn't even sleep without checking every corner of the house just to make sure he was not there. And for a short period, I even slept with the lights on. Even though he didn't exactly do anything physically threatening, him playing psycho tricks over such a long period on me is enough to make me feel unsafe in my own home. Just when the man was finally exiting my head, he came back at the perfect time. Worse still, I don't think I've ever seen his face, but I think he has seen mine. I hope I won't ever have to see his face, because his presence alone is malicious as it is. So to give some context, I'm a small-statured girl, about 5'1". I guess that makes me look easily preyed on, I don't know. One night at around 9:30 p.m. I realized I had no more pads and needed to go get some. Walgreens closed at 10, but it wasn't that far away, so I decided to head there right away. The Walgreens I headed to wasn't exactly in the best area. It was one of those neighborhoods that wasn't too safe, but was surrounded by other safe neighborhoods, so it wasn't exactly the worst either. I parked my car directly behind the door so I could see it from the entrance. There were spots in front of me that were closer to the door, but they were there in complete darkness. I would rather have to walk a little further from a well-lit spot than be hidden in the darkness. I was the only car in the parking lot too. I was on FaceTime with a friend, and I started walking toward the doors. I realized my car may still have been on. It's a push start, so sometimes I forget if I turned it off or not, but I always lock it regardless. I turned around to go check if it was still on. As I locked my car door and started walking away, a car came pulling in super quick. I immediately felt uneasy. I'm really paranoid by nature, so I just hurried up and walked inside. As I went inside, my friend had to leave from the FaceTime. I made my way to the aisle and couldn't seem to find the pads at all. I was in the adult diaper area trying to find some. I suddenly had that feeling that someone was following me, as I heard footsteps and just felt weird. There was only me and the employee in the store though. Maybe they thought I was stealing, as it was about to close. This kinda pissed me off, but whatever, do your job. I kept looking for the pads, and as I turned a corner, I noticed that whoever was following me kept ducking off into random aisles. As I turned to the next one though, the person wasn't quite fast enough. and I caught a glimpse of them. It was not an employee. It was a 5'4" or 5'5" older man, maybe late 40s or early 50s. He had frosted tips and looked like he was trying to look younger, but looked like a sketchy man instead. I felt weird, but I thought my paranoia was overthinking me. I grabbed my pads and went to the register. I kid you not when I tell you this man ran to the register empty-handed. If you would have been in the store as long as me, 15 minutes, and still had nothing on you, that was weird. He grabbed some sodas from the register fridge. I checked out and walked to the side of the store by the coolers in the photo area. This way I could see the register and the door, but they couldn't see me. I called my boyfriend and told him what had happened and to come immediately. The man took forever to check out his 2 soda bottles. Then he exited. I told the employee what's going on. She looks outside only to see that he's parked on the driver's side of my car. He drove a black older van model, think 2000s Pacifica or something like that. She said he had been acting weird and antsy too, and when I walked away he immediately asked where I'd gone. Thankfully, she let me stay there until he left, which took 7 minutes. My boyfriend arrived shortly after. I told him the description of the car, and he told me that as he pulled into the lot, he'd seen that car circling the building a few times, then hiding in the darkness of the back parking lot. Yikes. I haven't returned to that location ever since. What is up guys, Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the content of this video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you do decide you like my content enough to subscribe, please be sure to hit the bell button right next to the subscribe button and turn notifications to all so you can be notified of every video I post in the future. If you don't feel like doing that though, I post a video nearly every day, so you can just come back every now and then and check up on what you missed. If you guys have any criticisms on what I can do better or any feedback on the stories in the video, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as I always enjoy reading all the comments and I try to give them hearts and respond when I can. If you guys would like to reach me for any reason, or you would like to send in a story to be read, you can go ahead and take a look in the description below the video. You'll find a link to all of my social media, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has a theme, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. Last but not least, I also run 2 other channels, Mr. Blue Skies and Darkest Hour, where I do true crime videos and dark documentaries respectively. If that kind of content sounds interesting to you, why not go ahead and check it out and see if it is for you. Aside from that though guys, I think that's pretty much it for now, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.